He only wanted to save his gym clients from a threat called cupcakes. She only wanted to sell sweets in peace. But when a competitive personal trainer walks into her bakery ready to complain, and a stubborn baker answers by offering him the most dangerous dessert in the neighborhood, a delicious war begins, where losing might just be the best part. The smell drifted through the gym vents again. Ethan Reed stopped mid-rep, the dumbbell heavy in his hand. Vanilla. Butter. Something brown and sweet that had no business existing inside a place built for sweat and discipline. He set the weight down with a soft clink and listened. The lemon one. I'm telling you, Patrick, the lemon one will ruin your life. Don't tempt me. I just dropped 4 pounds. Worth it. Just walk in, smell the place, you'll see. His clients, talking about cupcakes, in his gym. He'd built this place to be loud in the right ways, the slap of jump ropes, the scrape of plates, the steady thud of treadmills. It was not supposed to smell like dessert. A whole week of this. 7 days since the pretty pink awning went up next door, and his clients couldn't stop talking about her. Hazel something, Hazel with the bakery, Hazel who made the truffle that changed Marjorie's Sunday. He'd lost 3 early morning regulars who had started swinging by for coffee and never coming back to finish their sets. He grabbed a towel, slung it over his shoulder, walked out the front door of Reed Athletics with the kind of expression that made his clients politely look elsewhere. The bakery sat across a strip of clean sidewalk, its window crowded with little cakes lined up like soldiers. Pink awning, white lettering, hazel and honey. He pushed the door open and a small bell rang above his head, cheerful, embarrassingly cheerful, the kind of sound that didn't match his mood at all. He stopped just inside the doorway. She didn't look up. A young woman stood behind the counter, head tilted slightly, a piping bag in her hand. Pink apron, sleeves pushed up to the elbow. She was decorating a row of cupcakes with the focus of someone diffusing a bomb, slow circles, perfect peaks, not a single tremor in her wrist. The whole shop smelled of melted chocolate and something citrus he couldn't name. He cleared his throat. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. She finished the swirl on the cupcake she was working on, set down the piping bag, and only then lifted her eyes. They were a soft brown, calm, slightly amused, like she'd been expecting him for days and was almost disappointed it had taken him this long. "Can I help you?" she asked. He crossed his arms. "You're sabotaging my gym." She blinked once. Then she smiled, slow with one corner first. "I'm sorry?" "My clients. They talk about your cupcakes for 45 minutes, and then they leave." His voice came out drier than he intended. "I run the place next door, Reed Athletics. 6 months of clean numbers, and now half my regulars are losing reps to think about your frosting. That sounds like a personal problem. It sounds like a you problem." She didn't answer right away. She just slid open a small glass case beside the register, picked up something dark and round in a paper cup, and pushed it across the counter toward him with one finger. "Try it before you complain. I'm not here to—" "Try it." There was something in the way she said it. Not pushy, not flirty, just certain. The way a doctor tells you to swallow the pill. He looked at the truffle, he looked at her. She raised one eyebrow with the patience of a woman who had done this before and would do it again. He picked it up. He bit into it. His brain went quiet. Dark chocolate, soft middle, a faint warmth he couldn't place. Caramel, maybe, or salt, or both. The kind of thing you'd want a second of right after the first one ended. He chewed slowly because he had to. Because if he chewed fast, he'd ask for another, and he refused to ask for another. He swallowed. He had not eaten anything that good in a long time. He resented every bite. He looked at her. She was watching him with the satisfaction of a card player who had already counted the deck. "I hate this," he said. "You hate it." "I hate that it's good." She laughed then. It was a small, real laugh, the kind that made the bell above the door feel less embarrassing, and she leaned her elbows on the counter and tilted her head at him. "What's your name?" "Ethan." "Hazel." She wiped a smudge of chocolate off her thumb with a cloth. "Now, Ethan, are we declaring war or are you buying a dozen?" He held her gaze for a long second. Then another. Both, he said. He paid in cash, took the box and walked back across the sidewalk to his gym without looking at the awning, because he refused to give her the satisfaction. His clients pretended not to notice the white pastry box under his arm. He set it on the front desk. He told himself this was research. He ate 2 more before lunch. He's watching you. Daisy said it with her mouth full of pastry, in the half-whisper of someone trying very hard to be discreet and not succeeding at all. Hazel almost dropped the tray of empty cupcake liners she was carrying. Who? Don't act surprised. Mr. Big Arms next door. He's at his window again. Hazel set the tray down behind the counter, dusted flour off her hands, and absolutely did not look toward the gym across the street. She kept her eyes on the lemon icing she was supposed to be coloring. She had a new batch in the oven. She had a 10 o'clock pickup for a birthday. She had no time to look at Ethan Reed through the window. She looked. He was at the front desk of his gym, leaning over a clipboard. He wasn't watching her. He was very visibly not watching her, which was almost worse. He keeps doing that, Daisy said, swallowing. Anytime the doorbell rings, like he's keeping score. He's not keeping score. He bought a dozen cupcakes yesterday. He bought a dozen yesterday because he... She stopped. She'd been about to say because he came over himself unannounced in his complaint voice, and she didn't want to give Daisy that detail. Because he likes them. He likes them, he likes them, oh, he likes them. Daisy. I'm just saying, people who don't care don't buy a dozen. It had started small. The day after Ethan walked into her shop and called her a saboteur, Hazel had packed a small white box, written "For your sufferers" on the lid in pink marker, and asked her delivery boy to drop it at the front desk of Reed Athletics. 3 sample cupcakes, 3 truffles, 1 note. She'd told herself it was good business. She'd told herself it was peace. She had absolutely not told herself it was a dare. He'd received it. She knew this because 40 minutes later, taped to the inside of her own front window in beautiful black calligraphy, clearly done by someone too professional to be free, she had found a poster, a calorie chart, for every single item in her bakery. The cupcake she'd just sold to Mrs. Patterson, 822 calories, 36 grams of sugar, listed in bold like a death notice. The truffle at the register, 290 11 grams of fat, hand-lettered with a tiny illustration of a heart looking unwell. Hazel had stood there for a full minute, staring. Then she'd laughed so loud she'd scared a customer. Now, 2 weeks in, the chart had been updated 3 times. He'd added the eclairs. He'd added the seasonal lemon tart. He'd added a small paragraph at the bottom, explaining how many burpees would burn each one off, which Daisy had pointed out was essentially an advertisement for both businesses, and which had nearly made Hazel tape a thank you note over it. She had not, of course. She had bought a bigger pink awning instead. Daisy poked her in the shoulder. He's coming over. He is not. He is. He's putting on the jacket. He hates the jacket. He's coming over. The bell above the door rang. Ethan walked in like he owned the sidewalk and was renting the bakery for the afternoon. He had on a navy track jacket zipped halfway, gym shorts despite the cold, and the faintly displeased expression of a man arriving for the second round of an argument he privately enjoyed. "You added a new one," he said by way of hello. "The blueberry." "The blueberry. You didn't tell me. I didn't realize I owed you a memo." Daisy leaned against the counter with the gleeful expression of a woman who had front-row seats to a tennis match and had no intention of moving until somebody won. Hazel slid a small blueberry tartlet across the counter without breaking eye contact. "For the chart," she said sweetly, "so you can update your numbers." He picked it up. He bit into it. His jaw paused, the smallest pause, less than a second, the kind only a person watching closely would catch. And then he kept chewing like nothing had happened. She caught it. He noticed her catch it. Neither of them said anything. 310 calories, he announced finally. "Worth it," she said, "highly debatable." He paid for the tartlet. He took it out the door. Halfway across the street he turned around, walked back inside and bought 4 more without saying a word to her face. Daisy waited until he was gone. Then she leaned both elbows on the counter and looked at Hazel with an expression that should have been illegal in business hours. "Honey, don't." He bought 4. I said don't. He came back for 4. Hazel rolled her eyes, picked up her piping bag, and went back to work. But she was smiling. She was smiling all the way to the kitchen, all the way through the next pan of cupcakes, all the way through closing. And when she finally locked the door that night and looked across the street at the lit windows of Reed Athletics, she could see him at the front desk, leaning on his elbows, eating something out of a small white box. She smiled wider. She did not let him see. Ethan was halfway across the street before he'd fully decided to walk over. The information had arrived 20 minutes earlier, casual as the weather, dropped by Frank from the rowing machine without looking up. Hazel. She trains at Bishop's, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Don't tell me you didn't know. Frank had said it like it was nothing. Frank had then continued rowing. Ethan had not continued anything. He'd stood at the water station for a full minute holding a paper cup he wasn't drinking from. Bishop's. Bishop's was 3 blocks away, smaller, older, with a treadmill that squeaked and a manager who still printed flyers in Comic Sans. She trained there. She'd opened a bakery directly next to the best gym in town, and she trained at Bishop's. He'd put the cup down. Now the bell above her door was ringing again, and Hazel was looking up from the register, with her mouth already curling at the corner, and he had not figured out yet what he intended to say. "Twice in one day," she said. "Should I be worried? You train at Bishop's." She paused. "How do you know that?" "Frank knows." "Frank? Your big grey Frank?" "He has informants." Hazel set down the receipt she was working on. She studied him with the careful interest of a woman trying to figure out which version of an argument was about to happen. "Ethan, is this offending you? Are we in a place where me going to a different gym is offending you?" "It's offensive." "It's what?" "You opened a bakery 6 feet from the best gym in this town, and you commute to Bishop's." "Bishop's, Hazel. I've been in Bishop's. It smells like rubber bands and divorce." She covered her mouth with the back of her hand, but the laugh got out anyway. "I have a contract there," she said. "I signed it before you existed in my life as a problem." "Cancel it." "Excuse me." "Cancel it. Train with me." She blinked. "Train with you," she repeated, "or train at you." "At my gym. With me, whatever. I'll match the price. I'll throw in 2 months for free. He stopped because he'd heard himself, and what he'd heard sounded much more like please than here is a sound business proposal. He cleared his throat. "It's the better facility. It's that simple." Hazel folded her arms. She tilted her head. She was silent for so long that the espresso machine sighed itself off in the corner. "Fine," she said. "Fine. Fine. I'll train at Reed Athletics." He felt the smile happen before he could stop it. He pushed it back down. "Smart choice." "On one condition." He waited. "You're going to taste a different one of my desserts every day," she said. "Every single day, until you find your favorite. And until you admit on the record in front of witnesses that my desserts are the best in this town. That's blackmail. That's a contract. That is blackmail in a pink apron. Take it or leave it." He pretended to think about it. He did not need to think about it. He had decided the moment she opened her mouth. Deal. She held out her hand to shake on it. He took it. Her fingers were cool, dusted faintly with sugar, and he held on a second longer than the moment asked for. She noticed. She didn't pull away. A customer cleared her throat behind him. He let go. Hazel grinned and started ringing up the customer like nothing had happened, but her shoulders had a different angle now, the kind of angle people get when they're pretending very hard not to be pleased. "By the way," she said over her shoulder, sliding a box of cookies across the counter, "you don't have to worry about the calories. I can eat anything I want. I take care of how I eat. I work out." He didn't answer right away. His eyes, without his permission, took a slow trip from her shoulder to her wrist and back up again. She was small but solid, the sleeves of her apron pushed past muscle that came from carrying 20-pound bags of flour every morning. The pink ribbon at her waist was tied wrong. "Yeah," he said, slow, easy. "I can see that. Your body is—" "It's good, Hazel. It's perfect." She froze. The color went up her neck and into her hairline like a candle being lit from below. She set the cookies down too hard. The customer behind him pretended to be very interested in a brochure about catering. Hazel opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again and said in the steadiest voice she could find, "Get out of my bakery." He laughed, quiet and slow, and walked toward the door. He paused at the bell. "Tomorrow," he said. 8 o'clock. Bring a water bottle." "Get out." He went. He was still smiling halfway across the street. He was still smiling at the front desk. He was still smiling at lunch. 8 o'clock came faster than Hazel wanted it to. She'd told herself she would treat it like any other gym day. Sneakers, leggings, the same grey sweatshirt she'd had since college. She tied her dark hair up in the doorway of her bedroom and looked at the mirror longer than she meant to, and then refused to acknowledge that she'd looked at all. She crossed the street with her water bottle in one hand and a small bakery box in the other. Insurance. The front door of Reed Athletics was heavier than she'd expected. The smell on the other side was nothing like her shop. Warm rubber, clean cotton, the faint metallic tang of dumbbells fresh from the rack. Her shoes squeaked on the polished concrete. Half a dozen heads turned. One of them was his. Ethan was at the squat rack on the far end of the gym, a bar across his shoulders, mid-set. He saw her. He froze. He set the bar back into the rack with a clean clack of metal and walked off the platform without finishing his lift, leaving an entire cardio class slightly stunned in his wake. Daisy, on a treadmill in the back row, made a sound that was either a laugh or a sob and pretended very hard to be drinking water. "You're early," Ethan said. "You said 8. "It's 7:56. "Then I'm on time." "You are." He looked down at the box. "What's that?" "Bribery for the front desk." "You don't need to bribe my front desk. You need to follow me." He pointed at the floor. "Sneakers. Good. Water bottle. Good. Did you eat?" "A muffin." "Of course you did." He took the bakery box without asking and handed it off to a young man at the desk like a man passing off a baby, then turned and walked her into the gym proper. She'd assumed she'd be left at a treadmill. She was not. Ethan led her to a bench at the back, pulled out a clipboard and started asking questions she didn't expect. What hurt? What didn't? What she did at Bishop's? How long she stood every day? How heavy were the flour bags she lifted? He wrote everything down with the focus of someone genuinely interested in keeping her uninjured, and Hazel, who had walked in armed with sarcasm, slowly forgot to use any of it. He set the clipboard aside. "All right," he said. "Warm up. Sell spot. You'll spot? You said you wanted training. This is training. You have a class. Patrick can run the class." Patrick, 20 feet away, did not appear to have been told this. Patrick blinked at his coach. Patrick took the class. Across the gym, Frank lifted his head from the rowing machine, took one long look at the situation, and said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "Oh, brother." Daisy choked on her water. Hazel pretended she didn't hear any of it. She got on the rower. She started slow. Ethan crouched beside her, one hand on the seat track, watching her form with the same attention he'd given the squat bar. After 30 seconds, he reached out and adjusted the angle of her shoulders with 2 fingers, barely a touch gone before it landed. "Lift here," he said quietly. "Pull from your back." She corrected. He nodded once. Neither of them said another word for the rest of the warm-up. By the end, she was breathing hard. Her hair had come loose. He passed her a towel without a word and walked over to fix the sound system, and she stood with the towel around her neck and watched him from across the room and thought, very clearly, "Oh no." The second week was worse. The daily tasting had become routine in a way neither of them had expected. He came in every afternoon at the same time. She had something different ready every day. He pretended to be unimpressed. She pretended not to notice his face when he wasn't pretending. They'd settled into a rhythm, banter, taste, ranking, banter, that the regulars had started to schedule their visits around. On day 11, she handed him a small eclair filled with vanilla custard. He bit into it. A tiny streak of cream caught at the corner of his mouth. She didn't think. She reached across the counter, brushed the cream off with the side of her thumb, and then, without 1 second of consideration, on pure stupid baker reflex, brought her thumb to her own mouth. The bakery went silent. She froze, thumb halfway down, eyes wide. Ethan was watching her with a look she had not seen on him before. "If you wanted to kiss me, Hazel," he said softly, "you could have just asked." Heat slammed into her face. She yanked her hand back, found her voice, found her dignity by the back of its collar. "In your dreams, Reed." He leaned forward across the counter, head tilted slightly. "Careful, Hazel. Tempt me too hard, and I'll talk you into it without much effort." She rolled her eyes, she turned her back. She walked very calmly into the kitchen. She put both palms flat on the steel counter and stayed there until her face stopped burning. Ethan had not lost a contest since he was 17 years old. He'd lost one then, a state-level wrestling match against a kid from Albany who later turned out to have an inch of weight he shouldn't have made, and the experience had reshaped his approach to anything competitive for the next 20 years. He did not enter races he had not trained for. He did not bet on cards he did not understand. He was, in his very bones, a man who knew when to walk away. This was the thing Hazel did not know about him. This was also the thing she was about to use against him. It was a Wednesday afternoon. He was at the bakery counter for the daily tasting, a small slice of cinnamon torte in front of him, halfway through a sentence he didn't get to finish. "Too soft," he was saying. "Could be tighter. Could you make it better?" He looked up. She'd asked it lightly, casually, wiping her hands on a cloth like the question had no consequences attached. Her dark hair was pinned up and spilling down on one side, and there was a smudge of flour on her left cheekbone that he absolutely did not point out. "What? Could you make it better, Ethan? You're a critic in here every afternoon. Could you actually do it? Could you make a dessert that holds up to mine?" The bakery went a little quieter. The two regulars by the window pretended to read the menu they'd memorized weeks ago. "You're asking me," he said slowly, "if I could bake. I'm asking if you could bake better than me." "Hazel, yes or no?" He set down the fork. This was the moment he should have walked away. He knew it. Every cell that had taken him to 17 years of unbeaten anything was screaming at him to walk away. He looked at her face and walked directly into the trap with both eyes open. "Bet? Bet. Terms," he said. "I make my bestseller. You make whatever you want. We put them both on the counter for a single hour. 15 customers vote. Whoever gets fewer votes loses." "And what do I lose?" "You cook me dinner, every night, for a full week." The bakery went very quiet. "And if you lose?" he asked, slow and careful. "You eat free in here for a month." He looked at her for a long second. He looked at the way she was leaning on the counter, both elbows down, chin lifted. He looked at the smile that was trying very hard to look like a smile and not like a victory lap. He held out his hand. "Done." She took it. Her hand fit smaller into his than he'd expected, and she let go faster than he wanted her to. He went home that night and pulled out a recipe book. He spent a full day in his kitchen. There were 3 drafts of a chocolate tart, 2 of a custard cup, and 1 cinnamon pear cake that was, by his own honest assessment, structurally unstable. He tasted everything. He fixed proportions. He went back to the chocolate tart because it was the one his mother had taught him as a child, and because, as he stood there in his apron, flour on the back of his neck, opening the oven for the 5th time, some part of him had begun to understand what kind of man he was preparing to lose to. He carried his single tart across the street the next afternoon. He set it on the counter beside hers. 15 customers came in. 15 customers tried both. 15 customers went for the chocolate caramel cake she had been making for 10 years. Mrs. Patterson, the 8th voter, looked at his tart with great kindness and said only, "Oh, sweetheart, you tried." Frank, who had no business being there but had wandered in to watch, awarded Hazel his vote and Ethan a single line. "You should stick to lifting things, son," before walking out. The 15th voter was Daisy. Daisy chewed slowly. Daisy considered. Daisy looked Ethan dead in the eye and said, "I don't even feel bad about this." He was eliminated by unanimous decision. He kept his face flat. He shook Hazel's hand again. He congratulated her with the dignity of a man whose insides were laughing too hard to speak. He had lost a bet. He had won 7 dinners. Walking back across the street with the empty pan under his arm and the failure of his tart still on his tongue, he had to physically stop himself from grinning at his own front door. Inside the bakery, behind the counter, Hazel locked herself in the kitchen for 30 seconds, and bit her lip to keep from squealing. Neither of them admitted any of it. Both of them already knew what the other was hiding. Ethan had cleaned his apartment 3 times before deciding that was suspicious. He stood in the middle of his living room with a dish towel still in his hand, surveying surfaces that had not been this organized since the day he'd moved in. He'd dusted the picture frames. He'd dusted the books behind the picture frames. He'd reorganized the spice rack alphabetically, and then looked at himself in the kitchen window and said, out loud, "Pull yourself together, Reed." It was the first dinner. He'd made roasted chicken with lemon and rosemary, garlic potatoes, a salad with shaved fennel he had purchased on purpose because he remembered Hazel saying, in passing 6 weeks ago, that fennel was underrated. He had remembered this for 6 weeks. He had not realized he had remembered it until he'd reached for it at the market and put it in his cart without thinking. The doorbell rang at 7. He set the towel down. He smoothed his shirt. He opened the door. Hazel was on his welcome mat with a small box in her hands, hair down over one shoulder, wearing a soft cream sweater and dark jeans, and looking, for the first time since he had met her, slightly unsure of herself. She lifted the box. Bread. You brought bread. I brought bread. I bake. It's what I do. I felt weird showing up empty-handed. You could have showed up empty-handed. Don't get used to that. He stepped aside. She came in. Her shoulder brushed his as she passed, and he felt every cell in his body hold still for a half-second, and then politely return to its normal job. The first hour was careful. They opened a bottle of wine. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table he had set with the only matching plates he owned. They talked about the food, the bakery, how Daisy had nearly fallen off the rower that morning trying to read his lips from across the gym. They laughed at the right moments. They held eye contact too long at the wrong ones. Twice, Hazel reached for the salt at the same moment he did, and twice she pulled back like the salt shaker had bitten her. By the second hour, the wine had loosened something. She told him about her father. Soft-spoken man, retired, lived an hour upstate, called every Sunday like clockwork. He told her about his parents, both alive, both well, both very involved, both in his business, in a way he found at once exhausting and deeply welcome. They started a story together at one point, and finished it without realizing it was joint. She left at 11. He stood at his door after she'd gone, and stared at the hallway for a longer time than was reasonable. He cleaned the kitchen. He whistled while he did it. The second dinner was worse in the way good things are worse. She arrived early. He was still in the kitchen, the front door unlocked because he had told her to walk in if he didn't answer the bell, and he was in the middle of searing onions when he sensed someone behind him. He turned. Hazel was leaning against the doorframe of his kitchen. She had clearly been there for some time. She was wearing a soft burgundy blouse that caught against the light. Her hair was pulled half up in a way that made her look younger than she was, and she was watching him cook with an expression he had never, in all the weeks he had known her, seen on her before. Quiet, soft, caught. "How long have you been standing there?" he said. "A while." "Why didn't you say something?" "I was enjoying the show." He set the spatula down. "Want me to spin?" he said. "For the photographs? I'd like that. Hazel. Mr. Gym owner. Built like that. Cooking in a tight t-shirt. I'm only human." He laughed. He couldn't help it. He set the spatula back on the pan and turned fully to face her, and her cheeks went pink, and she lifted her chin in a way that suggested she had absolutely meant every word and would not be retreating. "You should be careful," he said. "Why?" "Because I am very capable of believing you." She held his gaze for a beat, then another. Then she pushed off the doorframe and crossed the kitchen to him, took the spatula out of his hand and said, "Pay attention to the onions before they burn." He did. She tied her hair up with a band she pulled from her pocket, like it had been waiting there for this exact moment, leaned over the pan and started turning the onions with the focus of a woman who took her food seriously. "You stir like you're scared of them," she said. "I'm respecting them. You're respecting them too much." The kitchen smelled of butter and herbs and the soft cotton of her blouse, and Ethan, for the first time in a long time, did not know what to do with his own hands. He let his eyes follow her for one full second longer than the moment required. She caught it. She didn't say a thing. She brought lemons. She brought lemons, sugar, eggs, and a small, clean apron folded inside her tote bag. She had told him on the phone that she would make dessert for the third dinner, partly because his one attempt at a chocolate tart the week before was already a small legend among regulars at the bakery, and partly, though she did not say this part, because she wanted an excuse to stay in his kitchen longer than the first 2 courses allowed. By the time she arrived, he had already started the main. The smell of garlic and slow-braised tomato met her at the door before he did. He took her tote without asking, carried it to the kitchen with the kind of care reserved for fragile parcels, and stood watching her empty it onto the counter with a slow, faintly amused expression. "You really brought lemons. I told you I'd make dessert. I thought you were being polite. I'm not polite about pastry, Ethan." She moved through his kitchen like she'd been doing it for months instead of 3 weeks. She knew which drawer held the whisks because she'd asked the second night. She knew which mixing bowl was his favorite because he'd told her in passing while cleaning up. She tied the apron around her waist with practiced fingers and pushed her sleeves up to her elbows, and then looked at him with that small, sideways smile he had quietly stopped being able to defend himself against. "Are you going to help or just stand there?" "I'm watching." "That's not helpful." "It is to me." She rolled her eyes and threw a clean dish towel at his face. He caught it without flinching, hung it back on its hook, and then crossed the kitchen and stood beside her at the counter to start zesting lemons because she had told him to. That was when the trouble started. It was a small kitchen. It was a small kitchen that felt smaller with 2 people in it, especially when one of them was him and the other was her, and especially when she leaned in close to demonstrate the right pressure on the zester, and her shoulder pressed against his upper arm and stayed there a second longer than the demonstration required. He did not move. She did not move. The zester made its small grating sound, and the lemon oil rose into the air, sharp and bright, and she said very quietly, "Like that," and he said, "Got it," and neither of them looked at the other for a full 30 seconds. By the time the dessert was in the oven, his hands had brushed hers 4 times and he had counted every one of them, reaching for the same egg, reaching for the same spatula, reaching across to wipe a spot of batter off her wrist with his thumb when she didn't notice it was there. She had noticed that one. She had looked up at him with eyes that had gone round and soft, and he had pretended very hard that he was just being practical. They ate, they talked. The conversation slowed in the way conversations slow when both people start measuring their words because they don't trust what might come out otherwise. She told him about her grandmother's old recipe book, the one with the stained pages and the handwriting she was still trying to decipher. He told her about the year he'd dropped out of college to coach wrestling, and his father had not spoken to him for 4 months, and had then shown up at his first competition with a thermos of coffee and a quiet apology. She listened with her chin in her hand. He noticed the way she listened. He noticed too many things lately. She left early that night, but not because she wanted to. She left because when he walked her to the door, she stopped on the threshold and looked up at him, and her hand drifted, half by accident, to the front of his shirt, fingers resting lightly on the fabric, and she had felt the entire shape of what would happen if neither of them stepped back. She stepped back. He let her go. He stood at his door for a long time after the elevator chimed. The 4th dinner was different from the start. It was raining when she arrived. Not a hard rain, just enough to put a soft shimmer on the sidewalk and to leave dark spots across the shoulders of her coat. He took the coat. He hung it in the hall closet with a care she pretended not to notice. She had brought wine this time, a bottle she had picked out herself at a small place near her apartment after asking the man behind the counter what went well with whatever he was probably making. The man had asked what kind of evening it was. Hazel had said, "The complicated kind," and the man had laughed and reached for a Pinot. They were halfway through the main course when the lights went out. It happened all at once. The kitchen, the living room, the small lamp on the side table by the window, the hum of the refrigerator stopped. The whole apartment became suddenly aware of itself in the silence. "Storm must have taken the line," he said. "Should I?" "Stay there. I have candles." He moved without hesitation. 3 candles from the bottom drawer of the buffet, 2 from the bathroom, one from the back of his closet that smelled faintly of cedar and that he had completely forgotten about. He lit them one at a time. He set them on the table, the windowsill, the bookcase. The apartment turned gold around them, the way places do when you remove every modern thing at once and leave only flame. She had not moved. She was watching him from her chair with the wine glass held still in one hand, and her expression had gone soft, in a way that made him forget why he had ever wanted to win anything against her. "Better," he said. "Beautiful, actually." He sat back down across from her. The mood had changed. They both felt it. Neither of them named it. She took a slow sip of wine. She set the glass down. She looked at the candle flame between them, and then, without warning, started speaking about her mother. She told him everything. She told him that her mother had been the original baker in the family, that the two of them had spent every Sunday from the time she was 4 years old in a kitchen that smelled exactly like the one across the street did now, that they had drawn the bakery on napkins together, hazel and honey the awning pink because her mother's favorite color was pink, that when her mother had passed 3 years before, the dream had not gone with her, that every cupcake on her counter had her mother's handwriting somewhere inside it, even if no one but Hazel could read it, that her father came in once a week and ordered the same lemon tart and held it in his hands for a long time before he ate it, that she had not told this story to many people. She told him. She watched him while she told him. He did not interrupt. He did not try to fix it. He did not say, "I'm sorry for your loss," the way people do when they want a sentence to take care of a thing that no sentence can take care of. He listened. He let her finish. He reached across the table and laid his hand, palm up, beside her wine glass. An open offer, no pressure, no closing. She put her hand in his. He closed his fingers around hers. They stayed like that. He told her eventually about his own parents, the unfair good luck of having both of them, how they had started coming to the gym after he opened it, and how his mother now bench-pressed 40 pounds and called him every Tuesday to brag about it. How he had not realized how lucky he was until he watched Hazel talk about hers. The candles burned low. The lights came back on at some point. Neither of them noticed for a while. When she finally stood to go, he walked her to the door, and this time he did not let her hand go until the elevator was actually at the floor. He stood at his window after she'd gone and watched the cab disappear down the street. He understood now. He understood every single thing about that bakery. He would never look at the pink awning the same way again. Hazel had tried on 3 other things first. The black blouse was wrong. The cream sweater she'd worn to the first dinner felt like cheating. The pencil skirt fit, but felt like she was trying too hard. She stood in front of her open closet at 5 in the afternoon and worked her way through everything she owned with the slow, deliberate panic of a woman who had decided this dinner was different and refused to admit she had decided it. Then she found it. A deep green dress, sleeveless, 2 years old. She had worn it once to a friend's spring wedding and had hung it up afterward thinking, "That's it, you're done with this one." And now here it was, pulled to the front of the rack, fabric soft against her wrist, demanding to be worn. She put it on. She turned. She turned the other way. She reached back to fix a strap. She bit the inside of her cheek. "Honey," said Daisy from the bedroom doorway. "Honey. No. Honey. Yes. Honey, what are you doing?" "Too much?" "Too much," Daisy said, "is the goal." "Daisy, I'm telling you, wear the green. Wear the green and watch the man have a small private breakdown over his pasta. It's not a date." "It is a date, Hazel. It has been a date for 4 dinners. I will buy you a sign that says date, and I will hang it above your head if I have to." Hazel laughed, but her hand kept smoothing the same wrinkle at her waist that didn't exist. She had, sometime in the last 40 minutes, lost the ability to look at the dress and see only fabric. She kept seeing the way Ethan's eyes did that quick, careful sweep of her, the way he tried to hide it, the way he didn't always succeed, and she kept thinking very privately that she wanted to see what would happen if for once he did not try to hide it at all. She put on the green dress. She walked across the street. She did not knock for a long second once she had reached his door. She told herself it was the wind. She knocked. He opened. She watched it happen. She watched the entire weather of his face change in slow motion, the small parting of his lips, the half-step backward he took without realizing it, the way his eyes went down and then very deliberately came back up to her face, like a man pulling himself out of deep water by force of will. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Are you going to let me in, or are we doing this in the hallway?" He stepped aside. She walked past him. She did not look at his face. She knew if she looked at his face right then, she would lose every bit of composure she had spent 3 hours building and would dissolve onto his entryway rug. And that was not an entrance she was prepared to make. He closed the door. He cleared his throat. Twice. "That is," he started. "It's a dress, Ethan. It's a dress. You've seen dresses before. Not on you." She turned. She turned slow, and he was already looking, and they both pretended they had not just confirmed everything they had been pretending not to confirm for weeks. "You are going to ruin the food," she said. "Possibly." "Definitely. You're staring. You look—" He stopped. He chose a different word. He failed at choosing a different word. "Hazel, the dress is a problem." She smiled. She tried to make the smile small. The smile did not cooperate. "Are you complaining?" "I am thanking the dress." She laughed, helpless, and walked past him into his kitchen, and he followed her like a man carrying his own weight, in a way he had not had to carry it before. The fifth dinner was a strange affair after that. They ate, they drank. They told jokes that landed easily. He kept finding small reasons to look at her, the way her hair fell when she leaned forward, the small gold chain at her collarbone she had decided to wear because Daisy had said it would destroy him, and Daisy had not been wrong. And twice, when he stood up to refill her glass, his hand brushed her shoulder with a deliberate asking gentleness that asked a question neither of them was ready to answer out loud. She left at midnight. She was smiling all the way home. The sixth dinner, 3 nights later, was different again. She walked into his apartment expecting nothing in particular. He had not told her what he was making. She had not asked. She had been quietly distracted at the bakery all afternoon, replacing the sugar with salt twice in a single recipe, and had nearly gone home to change before deciding she would simply show up as she was. Black sweater, jeans, hair in a low ponytail. She walked into his kitchen and stopped. The smell hit her first. Then the sight. Sitting on his stovetop in a small heavy pot was a dish she had not eaten in 9 years. It was a Hungarian chicken paprikash with sour cream and homemade noodles, the way her mother had made it. Exactly the way her mother had made it. Down to the small green herb on top that her mother had insisted on putting there every single time, the one Hazel had mentioned, in passing, months ago, at the end of a long conversation about food at the very first dinner. She had said it once. He had remembered. She put one hand on the doorframe of his kitchen because she did not entirely trust her knees. "Ethan. It took me 3 days to find the recipe." "Ethan." There were 6 versions online. None of them were right. I called my friend's grandmother. She is from Budapest. She walked me through it. "Ethan, you—" "Sit down, Hazel." She sat. He served her with both hands, careful, like she was a thing to be handled with great care. She lifted the first bite to her mouth and closed her eyes, and was suddenly, without warning, 8 years old in her mother's kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, hearing her mother laugh at something her father had said. When she opened her eyes, he was watching her with an expression she had never seen on his face, soft, still almost afraid. "It's perfect," she said. "Good. It's exactly right." "Yeah?" "Yes." He did not say anything else for a moment. Then he stood up. He came around to her side of the table. He sat down in the empty chair beside hers and turned it to face her, and she turned hers to face him, and there was suddenly very little air left in the room. He looked at her mouth. She looked at his. His hand came up. His fingers brushed the line of her jaw with a slowness that was almost a question. She didn't move. She did not want to move. He leaned in. Her phone rang. It was on the counter. It rang loud and it rang fast, and it rang in the exact tone she had set for her father's number and could not under any circumstances ignore. The moment broke like a dropped plate. She closed her eyes for 1 second. She made the apology with her whole face. She picked up the phone. She walked into the hall to take the call. Ethan sat alone at the table with his hand still slightly raised in the air where her cheek had just been. He set it down. He laughed, quietly, at the ceiling. "Of course," he said to no one. She came back 5 minutes later. The mood was different. The chance was over. They both knew it. She left earlier than usual. He stood at the window long after she had gone, hands in his pockets, looking down at the empty street. He had been about to kiss her. He was going to kiss her eventually. That, at least, he now knew for sure. Outside, the maple trees on Main Street had finally let go of the last of their leaves. The sidewalk between the bakery and the gym was a soft drift of red and gold. The sky had the sharp, cold blue of late November. Hazel locked the bakery at 5, walked home, and showered. She put on a white silk blouse and dark trousers, and a small pearl pin at her throat that had belonged to her mother, a thing she had not worn in 3 years, and which she pinned on now without explanation, even to herself. She crossed the street at 7. Ethan opened the door before she knocked. "You're going to wear that out, you know," she said. "Wear what out?" "The carpet on your side of the door. You're always already standing there." He didn't deny it. He stepped aside and let her in, and she felt, even before she had hung up her coat, even before she had seen the table, that something about the apartment had shifted. The lamps were lower. The candles were already lit. The radio had been turned to something soft, jazz, an instrumental piece she did not recognize. He had ironed the napkins. He had ironed the napkins. She did not say anything about it. She did not need to. They sat down. The food was good. A roast he had been working on most of the afternoon, glazed carrots, a small bread he had bought from her bakery that morning, and that she had pretended not to notice him buy. She had nearly finished her second glass of wine when she made the gesture that broke everything open. She reached for the bread. She knocked her glass. A long, sharp arc of red wine spilled across the table, across the bread plate, and directly down the front of her white blouse. A wide, immediate stain that she felt before she saw. "Oh, Ethan, Don't move." He was already up. He was already at the linen closet. He came back with a clean white kitchen towel and pressed it gently to the stain at the front of her blouse, his voice going calm the way it went calm at the gym when someone needed an instruction in a hurry. "Stand up. It's fine, stand up, you'll set the stain, come on." She stood. He led her gently down the hall. He paused at the door of his bedroom, looked at her and said, "I'll get you a shirt. The bathroom's there. Take what you need." He did not look at the stain again. He had decided not to. She came out of the bathroom 3 minutes later in one of his white button-downs. It was much too big. The cuffs hung past her wrists. The hem fell to her thighs. She had rolled the sleeves twice and folded them at the cuffs. She was barefoot. She had taken off her low heels, and her hair, which had been half up all evening, was now down around her shoulders. He saw her come around the corner. He did not say anything. He could not for a second find the word. She looked at him. Her cheeks pinked. "It's enormous." "It is. I look ridiculous." He shook his head. His eyes had gone quiet and steady on her face in a way that made her go very still. "You don't, Hazel. You're staring." "I know." The radio kept playing. It had moved on from jazz to something slower, an old song she half recognized, the kind with a piano line that climbs a slow flight of stairs. Ethan glanced at the speaker. He glanced back at her. "Dance with me." It was not a question. It was not a command. It was somewhere in the middle, an offer placed into the room and left there. "In your living room." "In my living room." She closed the distance between them without another word. His hand went to her waist. Hers came to his shoulder. He took her free hand in his, careful, like she was a thing made of new glass, and they moved into the small open space between the kitchen and the couch and started to sway. The piano climbed. The song wound itself around them. They were not really dancing. They were holding each other in time with a song. She did not have words for the way the room held them. She did not look for any. He did not look for any either. They moved with the song and let it carry them, and that was enough. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. The world, which had been a wide and noisy place all evening, narrowed to the quiet circle of his arm at her back and the steadiness of his palm against hers, and the way his eyes had stopped pretending to look anywhere but at her mouth. He bent his head. Hazel. Yes. He kissed her. He had been waiting since she pushed a chocolate truffle across her counter the first time he walked through her door and called her a saboteur. And the kiss was every one of those days at once. Slow, certain, with the deliberate gentleness of a man who had decided long ago that when he finally did this, he was going to do it right. The song became distant. The room became distant. She felt the entire shape of the past 2 months reorganize itself behind her ribs. When he pulled back, he did not let her go. His forehead rested against hers. He held her there a long second. Her hand was still at the back of his neck, where it had moved without her permission. "I have wanted to do that," he said quietly, "for a very long time." "I know." "Yeah? I have wanted you to do it for the same long time." He smiled. He kissed her again. Somewhere along the way the song ended, and a new one started, and neither of them noticed. They stayed in his living room for a long time after that, talking in low voices, sitting on the couch with her bare feet tucked up beside her and her head against his shoulder. He told her things. She told him things. They laughed about the wine stain on the table. They laughed about the dress she had decided not to wear that night. He drove her home at 1 in the morning. He kissed her at her door. He waited until the lock clicked behind her before he walked back to his car. He drove the long way home with the radio on, just to keep going. Inside her apartment, Hazel did not turn on the lights. She walked in the dark to the kitchen window and watched the headlights of his car disappear around the corner. She touched her own lower lip with 2 fingers. She had no idea how a single evening had managed to feel both very fast and very slow. She did not bother to try. Frank Carter knew, because Frank Carter always knew. He had been a member at Reed Athletics since the doors opened, and a member at the gym before that since 2004, and what Frank had developed in those decades of watching other people's lives play out under fluorescent lights was a sense for the precise moment a thing changed. The thing had changed. He saw it on Monday morning when Ethan walked across the gym with the small, uneven smile of a man who had not stopped smiling since Sunday. He saw it again when Hazel walked through the front door at 10 with a pink box on her hip, and Ethan turned his head from a client and visibly forgot the client existed for the next 4 full seconds. He saw it a third time when Hazel walked back out and Ethan stood there at the front desk holding a small chocolate cookie that she had pressed into his hand without saying a word, and Ethan's other hand was still at his hip in the half shape of someone who had just been held there. Frank set down his water bottle. Frank looked at Daisy, who had walked in mid-treadmill that morning and was now staring across the room with the expression of a woman who had paid for the front row ticket and was getting her money's worth. "They kissed," Frank said. "They kissed." Past tense. Several past tenses. About time. "You owe me $20. "I do not." "Frank, we shook on it in March." Frank thought about it. Frank, in fact, owed her $20. He returned to his water bottle without comment. Across the bakery, the change was less dramatic and more constant. Ethan had begun appearing. He appeared at 10 in the morning to pick up a coffee. He appeared at 12:30 for a sandwich. He appeared at 3 in the afternoon for no reason whatsoever, walked in through the bell, walked behind the counter, which he was technically not allowed to do, and pressed a kiss to the side of Hazel's head while she was elbow deep in buttercream and could do nothing about it. The first time he did this, 3 customers gasped. The 5th time, no one even looked up. "Get out of my kitchen," she said the 11th time, halfway laughing. "I miss you. You saw me an hour ago." "That was an hour ago." "You are making me make typos in my recipe cards. Worth it." She hit him with a tea towel. He caught the tea towel. He kissed her again, slower, on the corner of her mouth, and walked back across the street whistling. Daisy, who watched this happen from the corner of the bakery while pretending to drink coffee, told Hazel afterward that she would be billing Hazel for emotional damages. By the 3rd week, the routine had changed everything in small ways. Hazel laughed more easily. She slept better. She had stopped checking the clock on the wall every time the bell over the door rang because she knew it was him without looking, even when it wasn't. He, on his side of the street, had begun setting his alarm 5 minutes earlier in the morning. He spent those 5 minutes drinking coffee at his kitchen window and watching her open the bakery from across the way. He had not told her he did this. He did not know how to. There were small things now. a jar of her honey on the top shelf of his fridge, a spare key to his apartment hung on a hook in her hallway, given without ceremony, accepted without comment. They had not put a name on what they were. They were not, in their own private opinions, in any particular hurry to put a name on it. The thing had a shape they could feel without describing, and the shape was good. The afternoon it happened was a Wednesday. Hazel was at the squat rack at the back of Reed Athletics, going through her lower body set under Patrick's casual supervision, because Ethan was in his office on a phone call and could not be there. She was reaching for a 15-pound dumbbell on the third rack, a stretch she could make but barely, when a young man she had seen around but never spoken to stepped in close beside her. "Here," he said. "Let me get that for you." Hazel had not asked. She also did not particularly need help. But the young man was already reaching past her, his hand near hers on the rack, when a third hand, not hers, not his, wrapped around the dumbbell first and lifted it cleanly out of his way. Ethan was standing there. He had crossed the entire gym in roughly 3 steps. Patrick, 20 feet off, made an oh-boy face into his clipboard and pretended to be checking attendance. "I've got her," Ethan said, calm as a Sunday morning. "Thanks." The young man, to his credit, looked between the two of them and made a quick read of the room and said, "Yeah, of course. Sorry." He moved off. Hazel waited. She waited until the young man was out of earshot. She waited until Ethan had handed her the dumbbell with a politeness that was not, strictly speaking, professional. She waited until Patrick had gone back to actually looking at his clipboard. She narrowed her eyes. "Ethan. Are you jealous?" "No. You are." "I am the head trainer in this facility. It is my literal job to assist members." 3 steps, Ethan. You crossed the entire gym in 3 steps. "That's exercise." She tried not to laugh. She did not entirely succeed. "You are jealous. Hazel. You are jealous." He looked at her. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the candlelight at the 4th dinner. He stepped in a little closer and put his hand at the side of her elbow lightly and lowered his voice. "I am the head trainer," he said again, "in this facility. I am allowed to assist members. That's what we're calling this. That's what we're calling this." She rolled her eyes. She let him keep his hand on her elbow. She lifted the dumbbell anyway because she had come to lift it, and he watched her do it with a little half smile he did not bother to hide. "All right," she said. "All right. I'll allow it. Generous." She finished the set. He stayed exactly where he was. Across the gym, Daisy on the treadmill said something out loud to no one in particular about how some people had no shame, and Frank, passing by on his way to the rower, and said only, "Some people indeed," and kept walking. It was the most fun Reed Athletics had ever been on a Wednesday. On her walk back across the street to the bakery later that afternoon, Hazel allowed herself a single small smile she did not let anyone see. She was, she could now admit, in a great deal of trouble. She was, she could also admit, in absolutely no hurry to be rescued. Hazel had not noticed the woman at first. She had walked into Reed Athletics that afternoon with a small box of cinnamon rolls under her arm. Wednesday lunch ritual, established now, expected by both of them. And her eyes had gone first to the front desk, where Ethan usually was at that hour. He wasn't there. Patrick was. Patrick saw her, raised an eyebrow that was not quite an eyebrow of warning, but not quite a normal eyebrow either, and gestured with his chin toward the back of the gym. She turned her head. She saw Ethan first. He was at the strength rack near the far wall, hands at his hips, in the posture of a man holding a regular professional conversation. Then she saw the woman. Tall, dark hair pulled back, a black training top, and the easy, athletic grace of someone who had been doing this for a long time. She was laughing at something Ethan had said. He was smiling, not the smile he gave Hazel, the polite one, the work one, but smiling. Hazel watched them for 10 seconds. She did not feel jealous yet. She felt instead an uneasy, cold sort of curiosity, the way you feel when you walk into a familiar room and someone has rearranged the furniture by a single inch. She turned to Patrick. "Who is that?" Patrick winced. "Hazel." "Who is that, Patrick?" He hesitated. He sighed. He answered her because there was no other version of the next 2 minutes that did not involve him answering her. That's his ex. His what? Ex-girlfriend, from a couple of years back. Long over. She just signed up today. We were as surprised as you are. Hazel did not say anything for a long moment. She set the box of cinnamon rolls down on the front desk, very carefully, like a person who has decided she might break something else if she does not hold something to begin with. Tell him I came by. Hazel, just tell him. She walked back across the street. It took her 4 minutes. By the time she had the bakery door locked behind her and her apron tied back on, she had told herself a dozen different times that she was being unreasonable, that a conversation between two adults at a gym was not a thing to be upset about, that Ethan had given her no reason in 3 months to doubt him for a single second. She was a sensible woman. She was also suddenly and overwhelmingly very jealous. She got through the rest of the afternoon by pretending the bell above her door was not what she was listening for. Ethan came in at 6. He looked at her face. He stopped at the threshold. He read her in the half-second it took him to walk to the counter, the way a man reads weather coming in from the west. "Hi," he said carefully. "Hi." "Patrick said you came by." "I did. You didn't say hi." "You were busy." A pause. "Hazel." "What? Are we doing the thing where I have to ask 3 times? I don't know what thing you mean." "You know exactly what thing I mean." She wiped the same spot on the counter she had already wiped twice. She would not look at him. She would not look at him because if she looked at him, she was going to either start laughing at her own foolishness or cry from a place she had not given permission to cry from, and neither was a thing she wanted to do at 6 on a Wednesday. He waited. He waited the way he had waited at the rower the first time she had trained at his gym, patient, attentive, willing to outlast her. "Hazel," he said again, soft. She put down the cloth. "Was your conversation with her good?" "What?" "With her, the one at the rack. Was it good?" His eyebrows went up. She watched him understand. She watched it land. "Hazel, don't. She just signed up today. I had no idea she was coming. We talked for 2 minutes. The relationship has been over for more than 2 years. There is nothing there. There has been nothing there for a long time." "Fine. It is fine. There is nothing to be fine about, because there is nothing there." "I said fine, Ethan." "You don't sound fine." "I don't have to sound fine. We're..." She felt the word coming and could not stop it. "We're technically single. You haven't asked me to be anything else." She heard her own voice in the silence after she said it. She did not regret it. She did very privately regret the technically. He did not answer right away. His face went through 3 different expressions in a row: surprise, then hurt, then something else she could not name. He set both hands on her counter, leaned forward slightly and looked at her. "Does what we're doing not mean anything to you?" "It means something." "Then..." "I said it means something. I just said we're technically single. Both things are true." She had run out of cloth to wipe. She picked up a tray of empty boxes. She took a step toward the kitchen. She was going to spend the rest of the evening in there with the door closed. He caught her arm. Not hard, just enough to stop her. He came around the counter. She did not look at him. "Hazel," he said, "look at me." She looked. His voice came out louder than he meant it to. Loud enough that the woman buying a tart by the window stopped buying a tart. Loud enough that Daisy, who had walked in at the worst possible second and was holding a paper coffee cup, stopped holding a paper coffee cup and held still in the doorway. Loud enough that the small white-haired lady at the corner table set down her newspaper. "I'm in love with you." The bakery went silent. "I want you. Only you. I have wanted only you since the first afternoon you handed me a chocolate truffle and ruined my entire business plan. Be my girlfriend, Hazel. Right here, right now, I am asking." She could not move. She could not look away. Daisy in the doorway dropped the coffee cup. The white-haired lady at the corner table whispered very softly, "Oh, finally." Hazel's eyes filled. "Yes," she said. He picked her up. He lifted her clean off the floor and kissed her in the middle of her own bakery, and the entire shop, the customers, Daisy, the white-haired lady, broke into applause that did not stop for what felt like a full minute. He set her down. She held on to the front of his jacket. She did not let go. The lock on her front door took her 3 tries to turn. Her hands were not steady. Her hands had not been steady since he had said, "I'm in love with you," in front of every customer, and Daisy and the white-haired lady at the corner table, who was probably already on the phone telling her sister about it. Hazel got the door open on the 4th attempt, walked in ahead of him, set her bag down on the entryway table, and did not look at him for a full second. Then she did. He was standing in her doorway with his coat still on, and his hands in his pockets and the same quiet, steady expression he had carried through every dinner. "Are you going to come in?" she said. "I was waiting to be invited." "You were just publicly in love with me 30 minutes ago. I think you can come in." "Different jurisdictions, Hazel. The kitchen is yours," she laughed. The laugh was small, surprised, the kind that comes out when a person realizes that the man they have just agreed to be with is also still the man who teases them about jurisdictions. He came in. He closed the door. She had not been alone with him at her apartment many times. He had been over for coffee twice. He had picked her up in the morning to drive her to a farmer's market once. He had until tonight never been here at the kind of hour where the streetlights came in low through her windows and made the kitchen look small and gold and intimate. He took off his coat. He hung it on her hook. He turned and looked at her, and she looked at him, and the air between them changed. "Hazel." "Yeah?" "Come here." She crossed the room. He met her halfway. He took her face in his hands and he kissed her, slow, deep, the kind of kiss that has no rush in it because there is no rush left to have. She had said yes. He had asked. The thing they had been carrying for 3 months had finally been put down on a table for both of them to look at, and now there was nothing to do but say the rest of it without words. The rest of the night belonged to no one but them. It was quiet. It was unhurried. It was in the parts that meant the most. Not really about bodies at all, but about the shape 2 people make when they have finally stopped pretending they were not the shape they were. He held her like she was something he had been entrusted with. She held him like she had never been afraid of anything in her life. He told her things, more than once, in a voice that was barely more than a whisper. She told him things back. Her bedroom became, for a long set of hours, the only room in the world. When the night came down quietly over the apartment, and the streetlights had moved across the ceiling more times than either of them had counted, they lay against each other in the dark and did not speak for a long while. She broke the silence first. "You said something earlier," she murmured. "I said a few things earlier. In the bakery. I remember. In front of the white-haired lady. I remember. Did you mean it?" He did not laugh. He did not roll his eyes. He turned his head on the pillow and looked at her in the half-dark. "Hazel," he said, "I have meant it since the second I had to ask you for your name." She closed her eyes. She did not say anything for a long time. When she opened them again, he was still watching her. "I'm going to ask her to switch gyms," he said quietly. "Who?" "My ex." She blinked. "Ethan, you don't have to. She has a right to train wherever she wants. I trust you. I trust you completely. You have never given me a single reason not to. You're a man of honor." "I know." "Then, I know I'm a man of honor. That's not the question. The question is whether you should ever have to walk into my gym again and feel what you felt today." "The answer is no." She looked up at him. "If a guy you used to date kept walking into the bakery every afternoon," he said, "and stood at your counter and ordered the same coffee for an hour, would I love it?" "No." "Right. So, Ethan, I am not going to do to you the thing I would not want done to me. It's that simple. I'm going to talk to her tomorrow. I am going to be polite about it. She's a reasonable person. She'll understand. There are 3 good gyms in this town. She'll be fine." She did not answer for a moment. She put her hand on the side of his face. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay, talk to her. But be kind." "I'm going to be kind." "I know you are. I just... say it back to me." "I'm going to be kind, Hazel." "Thank you." He kissed her forehead. She fell asleep against him. with his hand at the back of her head and his other arm tucked under hers, and for the first time in a very long time, she slept all the way through the night. The next morning, he was true to his word. He met his ex at the front desk of Reed Athletics at 10 o'clock with 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with cream. He had remembered, at least, how she took it. And he sat down across from her at one of the small tables in the lobby and told her, in a voice that was both honest and respectful, that he was in a relationship now, that he had been for a while, that he was very serious about it, and that he was asking her, as a personal favor and not as a manager, if she would consider one of the other 2 facilities in town. He was kind. He was clear. He did not apologize for things he was not actually sorry for. She looked at him for a long moment. She nodded. She picked up her coffee and said only, "I figured." She came in once. She had that look. She stood. She put on her jacket. She paused at the door. "I'm happy for you, Ethan. Really." She went. He watched her go. He picked up his phone and texted Hazel a single line. "Done. Going well." Bringing you a croissant in 5. 3 minutes later, the bell above the bakery door rang. She looked up from a pan of cinnamon rolls. He was standing there with 2 coffees and a small folded paper bag. He smiled. She smiled back. The world had, for the first time in months, very few unsaid things in it. By December, Ethan had stopped asking which side of her bed was his. It had taken him 3 months to figure out he had a side at all. Hazel had been raised by an only father and had no instinct for that kind of thing. And once he had occupied it with the matter-of-fact authority of a man who was where he was supposed to be. By the time their first anniversary rolled around in late February, his shaving cream lived on her counter, her honey lived on his fridge, and Daisy had stopped knocking before walking into the bakery's back kitchen because she had walked in on them kissing twice and announced loudly that she was no longer responsible for what she saw. He took her to dinner on the actual day. It was a small place, candle-lit, 2 streets over from the bakery. He gave her a small wrapped box that turned out to be a leather-bound recipe book, blank inside, with her grandmother's name embossed on the cover in gold. She cried at the table. He held her hand across the candle. He did not propose. She had not expected him to. She had not really even thought about it. Hazel was in love with the life she had. The bakery had grown. They had hired a second pair of hands. Reed Athletics had a healthier eating workshop on Tuesdays, hosted in partnership with the bakery, that had begun as a joke between them and had become a small line of additional income for both businesses. Her father came to dinner once a month and had taken to calling Ethan's son with the matter-of-fact ease of a man who had decided long ago that this was simply the case. There were no edges left to smooth. There were no questions she was waiting on him to answer. This is what he had been counting on. He had had the ring for 4 months. It sat in the small velvet box at the very back of his bedside drawer, behind a stack of old training notes, behind a paperback he had stopped reading in Chapter 3. He had bought it at a small shop 2 towns over on a Saturday, when she had thought he was at a coaching seminar. He had picked it not because it was the most expensive thing in the case, it wasn't, but because it was simple and small, and looked like the kind of thing she would pick herself if she had ever been the kind of woman who picked rings. He had been waiting for the right day. He had known for weeks that the right day was the same day he had decided not to propose at the dinner. He turned up at the bakery at 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday. It was a slow hour. The lunch rush was over. The afternoon coffee crowd had not yet arrived. Hazel was at the counter wrapping orders for pickup, hair pulled back, sleeves pushed up, the apron stained with that day's strawberry filling. He had a small white box in his hand. "I made you something," he said. She looked up. She raised an eyebrow. "You made me something." "I am capable of making things, Hazel." "You are capable of failing to make things, Ethan. I have watched you do it. This one I'm proud of." She set down the receipt she was working on. She came around the counter, wiped her hands on a cloth, and accepted the box with the same careful suspicion she had once accepted a chocolate tart in the same building, a year and 3 months ago when 15 customers had all picked her cake over his. She opened the box. Inside was a single chocolate truffle. The exact same kind she had pushed across the counter at him the first day he had walked into her shop and called her a saboteur. Same paper cup, same dark glaze, same dusting of cocoa powder. She lifted her eyes to his. "You did not make this. I made this. Ethan." "All right." Daisy helped. Daisy helped. Daisy made it. I oversaw. She laughed. She lifted the truffle out of the cup. She was about to take a bite when something about his face stopped her. The stillness in it, the careful way he was watching her hand, and she paused, and she looked at him, and she looked back at the truffle. She took a small, careful bite. She felt it before she saw it. A small, hard thing, not a nut, not a chocolate chip. Something else. Her teeth clicked against it. "Ouch," she said, and her hand flew up to her mouth and she caught whatever it was in her fingers and pulled it out. And then she stood there in her own bakery, in her flour-dusted apron, holding a perfect, simple gold ring covered in chocolate. She made a sound that was half laugh and half cry. Ethan was already on one knee. He had been on one knee since she took the bite, actually, and she had not seen because she had been busy nearly chipping a tooth on her own engagement ring. "Hazel," he said. She could not speak. She was crying. She was laughing. She was crying and laughing at exactly the same time, and her hands were shaking, and the truffle was still in her left hand, and there was chocolate on the gold ring, and Daisy, who had been hiding in the kitchen the entire time, was now in the doorway with her phone up filming. "Marry me," Ethan said. "I almost broke a tooth, Ethan. Marry me. You hid this in a truffle. Marry me, Hazel." "Yes." He stood. He cleaned the chocolate off the ring with his thumb, which she would later tease him about for years, and slipped it onto her finger with hands that were not, for the first time anyone had ever seen, entirely steady. He kissed her. He kissed her in the same spot of her own bakery where he had asked her to be his girlfriend a year before. When he pulled back, he tilted his head. He smiled the slow smile. "I told you," he said quietly. "I could talk you into it." She buried her face in his shoulder. She laughed against his coat for a long time. The bakery was again very full of applause. The white-haired lady at the corner table, who, as luck would have it, was there for this one too, clapped the loudest of all. The calorie chart had come down 2 summers ago. In its place, on the same square of glass at the front of Reed Athletics, there now hung a single framed photograph. It was a wedding picture, taken on a soft May afternoon at a small church just outside the town. Ethan in a dark suit, Hazel in white, both of them mid-laugh at something Daisy had said off-camera. The photograph was hand-lettered along the bottom in pink, the same shade of pink as the awning on the bakery across the street, with 3 short words. She won. People stopped on the sidewalk to read it. Tourists took pictures of it. Mrs. Patterson had told her bridge club about it twice. The picture had been there for the better part of 2 years, and Frank Carter, who walked past it every morning on his way in, still made a small approving sound under his breath as he passed. Frank, by the way, no longer owed Daisy $20. He had paid up at the wedding. The bakery had also changed. Behind the counter, in the corner where the rolling tray once lived, there now stood a wide and ridiculously comfortable armchair upholstered in a soft cream fabric Hazel had picked out herself. Ethan had hauled it across the street at 6 in the morning 2 weeks ago, when she had still been arguing that she did not need a chair, and had refused to take it back, even when she had glared at him. She had that morning glared at him for a full minute and a half. She had also that afternoon sat in it for an hour. The chair had stayed. It was a Tuesday in early autumn. The leaves on Main Street had begun to turn again. The doorbell jingled, and Hazel looked up from the order book she had been working on, and Daisy walked in carrying 2 paper coffee cups and the particular self-important expression of a woman with breaking news. "They're a girl and a boy," Daisy said. Hazel set down her pen. "What?" "I just talked to your sister-in-law." She talked to her sister, who was the receptionist at the office. "Don't ask how I know. The point is, the office knows, and now I know, and now you know. Boy and girl, twins. Confirmed." "Daisy." "What?" "You cannot tell me before the appointment. You don't have the appointment until tomorrow, and that's the point. You wanted to know. You absolutely wanted to know." She had wanted to know. She would deny this later. She had absolutely wanted to know. She set both her hands gently on the soft round of her stomach, and she sat down in the cream armchair Ethan had carried across the street, and she did not say anything for a full minute. The bell jingled again. He was there. He was there because he was always there now. Between his 10 o'clock client and his 11 o'clock class with 2 coffees and a small folded paper bag. Exactly the way he had been the morning after he had asked her to be his girlfriend, 2.5 years before. He read her face in a half-second. What happened? Daisy could not keep a secret to save her life. Daisy. It was for a good cause. Daisy. What did you do? I told Hazel about the babies. You told her what? A boy and a girl, the receptionist confirmed. He stopped where he stood. He looked at Hazel. He set the coffees down on the counter very carefully, the way a man sets down a thing that should not break, and he came around to her side of the bakery and crouched down in front of the cream armchair so that his face was level with hers. A boy and a girl, he said quietly. She nodded. She did not trust her voice. He put both of his hands very gently on hers, where her fingers were resting on her stomach, and he stayed like that for a long, quiet moment. Daisy in the corner had the decency to pretend to be reading the menu she had memorized 3 years ago. I had wanted a girl, he said. I know. I had also wanted a boy. I know that too. I was going to be happy either way. I know. This is a lot of happy in one bakery, Hazel. She laughed. She put her forehead against his. He held her there. Across the street, the photograph in the gym window caught the afternoon light. The pink letters were a little faded now from the sun, but the words were still there. She won. Frank, who had been on his way to the rower, paused under it. He looked across the street through the bakery window and saw the way Ethan was crouched in front of the cream armchair, holding Hazel's hands. He saw Daisy in the doorway pretending not to film with her phone. Frank shook his head and smiled a small, dignified smile. About time, he said, to no one. He went inside. Hazel and Ethan did not move from the armchair for a long time. They talked, they laughed. He told her that he was going to install a railing along the back kitchen step before the babies came so she would not fall, and she told him that the babies were the size of 2 limes and would not be falling for some time. And he kissed the top of her head and said, I'm planning ahead, Hazel. And she said, I know you are. He told her that his mother had already started knitting, 2 of everything in 2 different colors. He told her that her own father had insisted on being the first person to teach the boy to cast a fishing line. She said, they are going to be very, very loved. And he said, yes. They closed the bakery a little early that day. Walking home together, hand in hand with the leaves of Main Street drifting around their shoes, neither of them looked back at the awning or at the photograph in the gym window. They did not need to. Everything they had built was waiting for them at home. It would be there tomorrow. It would be there for a long time. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.